My stepmother had security drag me away from my own father's funeral and smiled while she did it. She thought she'd won the inheritance, the house, the legacy. What she didn't know was that I investigate people for a living, and within days, I uncovered a secret that would destroy her reputation, her freedom, and her entire claim to his fortune. This is family betrayal, revenge, and justice. She smirked as the security guards escorted me away from my own father's casket, telling me I wouldn't see a dime of the inheritance. But she forgot that I investigate people for a living, and I was about to dig up a secret from her past that would cost her everything. That moment is burned into my memory with a clarity that still makes my hands shake, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. The rain was coming down in sheets that day, turning the cemetery lawn into a muddy slick. It felt appropriate. The sky was weeping because I couldn't. I was too shocked, too hollowed out by the last 48 hours to cry. My name is Sadie Parker. For the last 7 years, I have worked as a senior investigative journalist for a major metropolitan paper. I have exposed corrupt city council members, tracked down money launderers, and shone a light on nursing home abuse. I am good at what I do because I am relentless. I don't take no for an answer, and I don't stop digging until I hit bedrock. But standing there, outside the wrought iron gates of the cemetery where my father was being lowered into the ground, I felt like a powerless child again. The woman who had ordered my removal was Linda, my stepmother, a word that feels like poison in my mouth. She stood under a massive black umbrella held by a chauffeur, her dry eyes hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses. She looked like a widow from a movie set, impeccable, glamorous, and utterly devoid of genuine emotion. As the 2 hired security goons gripped my arms, pushing me toward the parking lot, she lowered her glasses just an inch. That was when she smirked. It was a tiny, triumphant curl of her lip that said, "I won. You lost. Go away." I didn't scream. I didn't fight the guards. I just stared at her, memorizing that face, memorizing that expression. I swore to myself right then and there that she would regret this. She thought she had buried my father and buried me along with him, but you can't bury the truth forever. To understand why she hated me, you have to understand my father, Arthur Parker. He was a brilliant man, a self-made tech mogul who built a software empire from a garage in the 90s. He was kind, generous, and notoriously soft-hearted. After my mother passed away from cancer when I was 20, Dad was lost. He was a ship without an anchor. He threw himself into work, but he was lonely. Enter Linda. She appeared 5 years ago at a charity gala. She was a fundraiser, or so she claimed. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Charismatic, attentive, and seemingly fascinated by everything my father said. She played him perfectly. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, she had slowly started replacing his longtime staff with her own people. I tried to warn him. I did a background check on her back then, of course. I'm a journalist. It's instinct. But she was clean, suspiciously clean. No criminal record, a generic employment history in event planning, decent credit score. There were no red flags, just a beige landscape of mediocrity. I let it go, thinking maybe I was just being the jealous daughter. I was wrong. Over the last 2 years, as my father's health began to decline due to a heart condition, Linda tightened the noose. She became the gatekeeper. When I called, she would say he was sleeping. When I visited, she would hover, checking her watch, claiming he needed his rest. She isolated him. She poisoned his ear, telling him I was too busy with my career to care about him, that I was only interested in his money. The last time I saw my father alive was 3 months before he died. I had forced my way past the housekeeper to see him. He looked frail, confused. He asked me why I never called. I held his hand and told him I called every day. He looked at Linda, who was standing in the doorway with a glass of wine, and I saw a flash of fear in his eyes.
Before he could say anything else, she ushered me out, claiming his blood pressure was spiking. Then came the call. Not from Linda, but from his old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, telling me Dad had passed away in his sleep. The funeral ban was the first blow. The second blow came the day after the burial, at the reading of the will. I sat in a plush leather chair in a conference room that smelled of mahogany and old money. Linda sat across from me, looking bored. She was checking her phone. The lawyer, a new man named Distinctive Mr. Blackwood, because Linda had fired Mr. Henderson 6 months ago, cleared his throat nervously. He read the document. It was short. Brutal. I, Sadie Parker, was to receive a box of personal effects, photo albums, and my mother's old jewelry. That was it. Everything else, the estate, the investments, the life insurance, the intellectual property rights, the 3 vacation homes, and the sprawling Maine residence, was left to his beloved wife, Linda Parker. Mr. Blackwood looked at me with pity. Linda didn't look at me at all. She was inspecting her manicure.
"Sadie," Mr. Blackwood said gently, "the will includes a no contest clause. If you attempt to challenge this in court, you will forfeit even the personal items." I looked at Linda. She finally met my eyes. "It's what he wanted, Sadie," she said, her voice smooth like syrup poured over broken glass. "He knew you were independent. He knew you didn't need his help. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of." "Taken care of?" I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You're inheriting a fortune worth $50 million. You banned me from his funeral. Do you really think this is what he wanted?" Linda stood up, smoothing her skirt. "He signed the papers, dear. That's all that matters. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a celebration of life to plan. A private one. You're not on the list." She walked out. I sat there for a long time. The grief was a heavy stone in my chest, but underneath it, the fire was starting to burn. She had made a fatal error. She had made this personal. She had taken the one thing I couldn't get back, my chance to say goodbye to my dad, and she had done it out of spite. I went home to my apartment. I didn't sleep. I paced. I drank coffee until my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. She was clean on paper. I knew that. I had checked 5 years ago. But people who are that cruel, that manipulative, they don't just appear out of thin air. They have a history, and usually it's a history they've worked very hard to hide. I went to my editor the next morning. I told him I needed a leave of absence. He looked at the dark circles under my eyes and told me to take as much time as I needed to grieve. "I'm not going to grieve," I told him. "I'm going to work." I turned my apartment into a war room. I pinned a photo of Linda on my whiteboard. I wrote down everything I knew about her. Name, Linda Marie Vance. Age, 52. Hometown, listed as Chicago, Illinois. Previous employment, event coordinator. I started over. I didn't just run a background check this time. I went deep. I used the tools that aren't available to the general public. I scoured the deep web databases. I looked for archived versions of deleted social media profiles. For 3 days, I found nothing. She was a ghost. It was as if she didn't exist before the age of 30. Then, I got a hit. It wasn't on Linda. It was on a woman named Lindy. I was scrolling through a digital archive of a small-town newspaper from rural Nevada, scanning for the name Vance. I found a grainy photo from 1995. It was a coverage of a local beauty pageant. Third runner-up, Lindy Miller. The face was younger. The nose was slightly different, probably a rhinoplasty paid for by some other sucker, but the eyes were the same. Cold. Predatory. Lindy Miller.
I ran that name. Lindy Miller had a record. Not a criminal one, but a financial one. A string of small claims court judgments in Nevada and Arizona. Unpaid rent, credit card defaults. I traced her movement. She moved around a lot in the late 90s. Nevada, Arizona. Then she popped up in Florida in 2001. I focused on Florida. I started digging into county clerk records in the Panhandle area, marriage licenses. And there it was, Certificate of Marriage. Date, June 14th, 2001. Groom, Richard Earl Davis. Bride, Lindy Marie Miller. I froze. Okay, she was married before. That wasn't illegal. She probably divorced him. I searched for a divorce decree. I searched Florida records. I searched Nevada, Arizona, Illinois. I searched federal databases. There was no divorce record. My heart started to beat faster. Maybe he died? I ran a search on Richard Earl Davis. He was alive. He was 68 years old, living in a trailer park in a town called Ocala, Florida. I looked at the date of her marriage to my father, 5 years ago. If she never divorced Richard and Richard was still alive, then her marriage to my father was bigamy. It was void. Void ab initio, meaning from the beginning. It meant legally she was never his wife. And if she wasn't his wife, the clause in the will leaving everything to my wife, Linda Parker, might be contestable. But more importantly, in our state, bigamy is a felony. It's fraud. I needed proof. Digital records weren't enough. I needed a statement. I needed to look Richard Earl Davis in the eye. I booked a flight to Florida that night. The drive to Ocala was humid and sticky. I pulled up to the trailer park in a rental car that looked out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and faded awnings. I found Lot 42. A man was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. He looked weathered, his skin like leather, wearing a grease-stained tank top. "Mr. Davis?" I asked, stepping out of the car. He squinted at me. "Who's askin'?" "My name is Sadie Parker. I'm a journalist. I'd like to talk to you about a woman named Lindy Miller." The change in his demeanor was instant. He spat on the ground. "I ain't heard that name in 20 years. What's she done now?" "Can I come in?" I asked. "I think she might have stolen my inheritance." He laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Sounds like her. Come on up." Over the next 2 hours, Richard told me a story that made my blood run cold. He had met Lindy when she was a waitress. She charmed him, made him think she loved him. He had just received a settlement from a workplace injury, about $100,000. They got married. 3 months later, he came home to find the house empty. She had cleaned out the bank accounts, taken the cash, the jewelry, even his truck. She vanished. "Why didn't you divorce her?" I asked. He shrugged, looking defeated. "I didn't have the money for a lawyer. She took it all. And honestly, I was ashamed. I was a fool. I figured she was gone for good. I never planned on marrying again, so I just let it be. I filed a police report for the theft, but they never found her. She uses different names." I pulled out a photo of Linda from my bag. It was a picture of her and my dad at a gala. She was wearing diamonds worth more than Richard's entire trailer park. "Is this her?" I asked. Richard put on his reading glasses. He stared at the photo for a long time. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's Lindy. Looks like she found a bigger fish." "I need you to help me, Richard," I said. "I need you to sign an affidavit stating that you are legally married to her and that you never divorced." He looked at me. "What do I get out of it?" I looked around his dilapidated trailer. "If I win this, I'm going to get my father's estate back. If you help me take her down, I will make sure you get the $100,000 she stole from you plus interest. I'll write you a check myself." He stuck out a calloused hand. "Deal." I flew back home with a signed affidavit, a certified copy of their marriage license from the county clerk, and a video interview with Richard. I went straight to my lawyer friend, Matt. Matt is a shark in a cheap suit, the kind of guy who enjoys a fight. I laid everything out on his desk. Matt looked through the documents. He whistled low. "Sadie, this is a nuke. If this holds up, her marriage to your dad is bigamous. It's a legal nullity. She has no standing as a surviving spouse." "What about the will?" I asked. "It leaves everything to my wife, Linda." Matt grinned.
Technically, she isn't his wife. But even if a judge argues intent, we have her on fraud. She signed a marriage license with your father stating she was single. That is perjury. That is fraud. We can invoke the Slayer statute equivalent or argue undue influence based on criminal deception. At the very least, we tie up the assets for years and expose her. But usually, in cases of bigamy, the court comes down hard. She tricked him into a marriage contract. It invalidates her rights. So what do? File a motion? Matt shook his head. We will, but you said she's having a celebration of life party tomorrow? Yeah, at my dad's estate. She invited the press, the mayor, the city elite. She wants to cement her status as the grieving, wealthy widow. Matt leaned back. Well, you're an investigative journalist, Sadie. Do you want to do this quietly in a courtroom, or do you want to do this the way she deserves? I thought about the funeral. I thought about the security guards handling me. I thought about her smirk. I want everyone to know, I said. The day of the celebration of life was perfect.
The sun was shining on the sprawling lawn of my father's estate. White tents were set up, waiters were circulating with champagne. It was sickening. It wasn't a memorial, it was a coronation. I arrived in my own car. I parked at the bottom of the driveway and walked up. I was wearing a black dress, sharp and professional. I had a folder in my hand. The security at the gate recognized me. They stepped forward. Miss Parker, you are not permitted on the premises. I didn't stop walking. I am a tenant in common of this property until probate is settled, and I have police escort. I motioned behind me. 2 police cruisers rolled up the driveway. I had visited the precinct earlier that morning with my evidence of bigamy and fraud. They were very interested in a woman who had committed felony fraud and potentially swindled a local icon. The security guards stepped back, confused. I walked onto the lawn. Linda was on a small stage, holding a microphone. She was crying, fake tears, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Arthur was my soulmate, she was saying, her voice trembling theatrically. He was the light of my life. I only hope I can honor his legacy. I walked right through the crowd. People turned to look. The sea of black suits and designer dresses parted for me. Linda saw me. Her eyes went wide. She lowered the microphone. Sadie, she hissed, her voice caught by the mic, booming over the speakers. What are you doing here? Security! The security guards started to move, but the police officers stepped onto the grass, their hands resting on their belts. The guards froze. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I didn't grab the mic. I didn't need to scream. The silence in the garden was absolute. I stood next to her. She looked terrified. For the first time, the mask slipped. She looked old. She looked trapped. Get off my stage, she whispered furiously. It's not your stage, Linda, I said, loud enough for the front row to hear. And it's not your house, and it's not your money. I opened the folder. I pulled out the marriage license from 2001. I turned to the crowd. I recognized the mayor. I recognized my father's business partners. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said, projecting my voice. I know you're all here to honor my father, but the woman standing here is not his widow. Linda lunged for me, trying to grab the papers. The police moved fast. They stepped onto the stage and blocked her. What is this? Linda shrieked. She's crazy. She's grief-stricken. Get her out of here. I held up the document. This is a marriage certificate from Okaloosa County, Florida, dated 2001. It proves that this woman, whose real name is Lindy Miller, is currently married to a man named Richard Davis. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras started flashing. The press, who Linda had invited to document her glory, were now smelling blood. I turned to Linda. Richard says hello, by the way. He's very interested in that $100,000 you stole from him. Linda's face went pale.
She started to shake. It's a lie. I divorced him. Show us the papers, Linda, I said calmly, because I checked every database in the country. You never divorced him. You just ran away. I looked at the police officers. Officers, this woman is committing bigamy. She signed a marriage license with my father under penalty of perjury, stating she was single. That is fraud. She is currently attempting to defraud this estate. The lead officer, a stern man named Sergeant Miller, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us to answer some questions." Linda looked around. She looked for an escape, but she was surrounded. She looked at the crowd, the people she had tried so hard to impress. They were looking at her with disgust. The illusion was shattered. "You little witch," she spat at me. "I made him happy." "You made him a victim," I said, cold as ice. "You isolated him, you lied to him, and you banned his daughter from his funeral." The officers took her by the arms. She didn't go quietly. She started screaming, cursing, revealing the true nature she had hidden for 5 years. As they dragged her off the stage and toward the cruisers, the cameras captured every second of it. I stood alone on the stage. I looked out at the confused, murmuring crowd. I saw Mr. Blackwood, the lawyer, looking like he was about to faint. I walked over to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "My father was a good man. He valued truth above all else. I think he would have appreciated this investigation." I walked off the stage. The aftermath was a legal tsunami. With the evidence I provided and Richard's testimony, the probate court froze the assets immediately. The marriage between my father and Linda was declared void ab initio. Legally, it never existed. Because she was not his wife, she had no claim to the estate. The will's bequest to my wife failed because the condition was based on a fraudulent premise. Furthermore, because she had isolated him and lied about her identity, Matt filed a civil suit for fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Linda, or Lindy, didn't just lose the money, she went to prison. The DA charged her with bigamy, perjury, and grand larceny regarding the assets she had already tried to liquidate. She is currently serving a 5 to 7 year sentence. I kept my promise to Richard. Once the estate was settled and I was named the sole beneficiary as the next of kin, I wrote him a check for $200,000. He bought a new truck and a double-wide trailer. He sends me Christmas cards. I moved back into my father's house.
It was strange at first, being in that big, empty place. I spent weeks clearing out Linda's things. I donated her designer clothes to a women's shelter, a final irony she would have hated. I found my dad's old journals in a box she had shoved in the attic. In the last entry, written a month before he died, he wrote, "I miss Sadie. Linda says she's busy, but I feel like something is wrong. I hope she knows I love her." I sat on the floor of the attic and finally cried. I cried for hours. I cried for the time we lost. I cried for the loneliness he felt. But as I sat there, wiping my eyes, I looked out the window at the garden where the police had dragged her away. I didn't get to say goodbye to him. I didn't get to hold his hand at the end. But I got him justice. I cleared his name of her parasitic influence. I protected the legacy he built. And I learned something valuable, something I carry with me in every investigation I do now. Evil often wears a pretty face and a designer suit. It hides behind paperwork and politeness. But everyone leaves a trail. Everyone has a secret. And if you mess with my family, I will find it. I'm Sadie Parker, and that's how I exposed my stepmother's secret life and reclaimed my father's name. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a newspaper to run. My dad always wanted to invest in media. I think I'll start by buying the paper that printed her society photos and running a full-page retraction. Justice is served. If you stayed until the end, you already know. Some betrayals don't get forgiven, they get exposed. Subscribe for more revenge and justice stories. If you believe the truth always deserves to come out, even when it hurts, make sure you like this video and subscribe.